Hey guys, welcome to Fully Armed. I'm your host, Chris Hennessy. Today we are going to be speaking with the 5-time CMA Musician of the Year, Jenee Fleenor. You're going to learn some interesting stuff about her name, her maiden name, her first name is pretty, you'll see. We're going to learn about when she started playing fiddle. We're going to learn about her time on stage with the king of country music. And we're going to hear her do an amazing song. And anyways, we're going to hear a lot of stuff from Jenee Fleenor. So here it is, Fully Armed with Jenee Fleenor.
Welcome to the Fully Armed Podcast with Chris Hennessy. You got your armor on?
Feet on the grass, I'm listening. I see you now in everything. The fire, the stars, the blazing sun, all say it's true. When I see the light, I'm seeing you. When I see the light, I'm seeing you. In everything, in everything, in everything, I see you. In everything, in everything, in everything, I see you. A still small voice, your frequency resonates in the deepest part of me. The wind, the storm, the morning dove, all say it's true. When I hear their song, I am hearing you. When I hear their song, I am hearing you. In everything, in everything, in everything, I see you. In everything, in everything, in everything, I see you. A broken jar and a fragrant room. She spins it all to honor you. There's nothing wasted, nothing more that I can do. When I give it all, I am loving you. When I give it all, I am loving you. In everything, in everything, in everything, I see you. In everything, in
let's just go ahead and start off and break the ice with a little king of country music.
Here
all
we
right? Go ahead.
3, 4.
Oh, yeah. What if I said rip off some Cajun? What
Some
was just
Cajun?
like the
Let's
go-to
see.
Cajun lick that you would
Maybe
do?
Diggy Diggy Lie.
Yeah, there you go. There it is. All right, what's a standard bluegrass? Just like,
Let's
yeah,
see.
I know that's kind of, that's in your wheelhouse.
It
But
is in my. Well, I'll do one of our Woodbox Heroes.
there you go. Yeah. Yes. All right. So, how about what if I said just classical? Just
classical.
oh.
Oh, I don't do a ton of that. I mean, I do
No.
like. Well, let's see.
I'm just putting you on the spot.
I don't know. Classical people are going.
I'm not.
That's
Listen,
not how that goes.
that's no. I get it. Trust me. Well, I'd like to see the classical folks try to play the other two things that you were playing.
don't know.
So I am not going to go polka right now.
Gosh.
But
I do
y'all,
have some polkas.
we've got my neighbor Jenee
Yeah.
Fleenor here with us today, and I am so glad to have you come over and have coffee and
Yeah, glad to be here.
Have a cup of ambition.
I love this cup.
So, Jenee is originally Springdale, Arkansas, right? By way of Goodlettsville and just over the ridge right here.
Yeah.
And you good?
I'm good.
All right.
I'm great.
Good.
I'm
You've been
feeling
staying
good.
busy, I know.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at that.
Yeah, you are
About
very
doing
good
things.
at that. Yeah,
Except for when you called me for this podcast.
Yeah. Well, so when we first started this thing, 30 seconds ago,
Right.
I wanted very badly to do a George Strait song, the king
yeah,
of country
yeah.
music,
Absolutely.
because if it's not the first time I met you, but the first time we were on stage together was in Key West.
Yeah.
Check. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
As the backing band for George Strait. How
So
cool was
wild.
that?
The coolest.
Yeah.
I mean, I have been blessed to do a lot of cool things in my career, but I will say that's like top. I mean, right
Yeah.
at the top.
Me
top.
too. So what a day for me, because I'm a Tennessee Vols fan, and
yeah.
Tennessee played Alabama that day.
Oh,
That was 2 years ago.
I didn't know this. Wow.
Yeah, and they beat them. And so then I'm on stage already super happy,
Wow.
especially because Jamie's the front guy sort of in that situation, and he's from Alabama. That was fun. But then we get to play with George Strait, and I get to watch your face all
my
night going,
God.
oh my gosh. And then
Yeah.
and that was actually obviously a big fun for me because it was George Strait. But then he played a Tom Petty song, and I got to play a solo on "You Wreck Me."
Yep.
And I was like, "This is just so cool." So that's why I wanted to kind of start off with that and do a little fiddle number. So thank you for indulging me with those
Absolutely.
other things that you were doing. So Arkansas, when did you move to Nashville?
Oh my gosh. I moved here in 2001, right out of high school.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew probably when I was about 11 years old that I wanted to move to Nashville someday and be a session musician. I mean,
Okay.
it's-
Hold on.
yeah.
Because
It's kind of crazy.
you know the deal. Most folks, musicians, they want to be
Mm-hmm.
rock star, country star. So right off the bat, you were like, I want to play in the studio.
Yeah, it's I love to perform and all those things, and I still love to do all of that. But I mean, I think as a creative part of being a session player always
Mm-hmm.
intrigued me. I loved when I heard the music coming out of the radio. Like I knew these were the best musicians. Like they were just amazing musicians, and they became my heroes. And some of them eventually I was able to work with when I was a teenager playing at steel guitar conventions. I'd get to sit on
Yeah.
stage and observe these amazing musicians. And I think it was the challenge of it. And I was fortunate enough to work in some studios when I was really young, and realize I just loved the challenge of it. And creatively, I got to come up with what I wanted to play. I mean, like obviously a producer's going to tell you
Oh, no,
now
I
that
get
I've been on this journey, but like
Right.
a lot of it is about you creating
Right.
a sound. So obviously you don't move here and just start doing session work. I was 18 when I moved here. I went to Belmont, and I was fortunate to walk in the station inn and get a job within 2 weeks of moving here.
Wow, that's
it's
great.
not what I like. I just went there to see Larry Cordell play and ended up in the green room playing my fiddle. I didn't know they were looking for a fiddle player. And I ended up playing, and Larry called me for the job like the next week.
Yeah.
And I'm playing the Grand Ole Opry within a month of moving to Nashville. And I'm on the road with a bunch of hairy-legged men.
Oh, my gosh. That's great.
Within a couple months. And it's so wild. But I'll never forget driving. My first time playing the Opry was at the Ryman, which is like...
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah. And there was 2 shows that night. And I just remember driving downtown, like seeing the skyline and everything and going, oh, my gosh, like I felt like I'd made it. It's been a beautiful journey.
I remember that specifically for me too, like the skyline, which has changed a lot in the last 10 years. But, and I was kind of like you. I was in 98 when I moved to town. So there was just something about driving into town and seeing like I've made it. And in reality, you're just driving to town. But there's a thing though, right? That really takes
like my
you.
dreams, like all those dreams that I had, like I didn't live in a big city or what, but this was what all my dreams were made of. And I'm like, I'm here in Nashville. I'm driving to do the thing that like I've seen all my heroes do, play the Grand Ole Opry, and which just fires some more dreams up in you. I mean, I still obviously had the goal of being a session player, which came way later. But yeah, all these things were firing up in me, and things that God had placed in my heart. I really believe it.
Yeah. So, and I want to get back to that, but I do want to say this as we're moving along. There's 2 ways that I can do this show. There's act like there's nothing wrong and just plow through, or I can just be honest and say it's hot right here.
Honesty is the best.
It is for this show. So, and I've said this. We've only done a couple of these things, but I always say, number one, I'm not a preacher, and I'm not a teacher, of the law or anything.
Yeah.
I'm learning as we go.
Yeah.
And number 2, this is raw. We ain't messing around
I love
here.
it.
I am sitting in in an RV, a 2006 Miss Judy, aptly named, and the sun is here, and the air conditioner is E4. Anybody I'm not going to say what brand it is, but we're having an issue. So I'm just going to go ahead, instead of sit over here and act like I'm not sweating, just go ahead and say
fine.
It's hot, and we're going to take a break in a little while and turn the air on and come back around, and that's just what we're going to do.
Keeping it
here.
real.
So
yeah.
I go back to what you were saying earlier, because you tapped into something that I haven't thought about in years. So 26 years ago, I guess, there was such a feeling when I moved to Nashville. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know. I moved to town and stayed with an old college roommate in his den, just threw a mattress out.
Yeah.
But man, there was such a feeling of walking down Broadway, and even back then it was such a different place.
Yeah.
But you were just like so in awe of everything. And then how about the first time you walk into like a major studio,
Oh yeah. I'm trying. Well, actually, when I got the gig with Larry Cordell, it was like some of the first recording I did. Like, we were recording for Larry's record, and I actually got to sing a solo on it. And we recorded at Station West, and is a place that I still record at a lot.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's funny because the hallway that I sit in is the same exact hallway, and so it's cool to get. And I just flashed back to that moment of like being a scared 18-year-old or whatever. Like, I'm really getting to do this thing. Of course, I've learned so much. Even when I hear my fiddle mic'd on that Cordell record, it was mic'd too high, and you can hear the room a little bit. And I was like, oh, I wish I would have known about mic placement and all that. But I'm just like, but those are the things you learn.
Well, there's something endearing to that too. I a lot of times I'll listen to. So I'm a huge Charlie Daniels Band fan.
Yeah,
and so I'll listen to some of those songs that I love so much, and I'm like, here it comes. Yep, there was the bass flub. I heard it right there. And then here's this and here's that, and it's like all of these things that, on the one hand, these guys would probably want to go back and fix. On the other hand, they're like, oh gosh, no, I wouldn't touch that for anything. So it's just all about the learning process, but within that learning process, you make some pretty cool.
Oh yeah, I think I've worked a lot now with Jim Moose Brown and
our neighbor.
Another neighbor. You need to have him on here. And I love his productions because, and now that I've worked with him, I get it because he doesn't let you as a session player go past that. Like I guess in the studio a lot of times we'll sit there and work on a solo till it is just like almost too perfect.
Yeah.
And he will not let you go past that point of like keeping it real and raw. And there's a Trisha Yearwood song I played on recently, and I'm pretty sure I did it in one pass. Because my heart was just so, and he would not let me replace anything.
That's great.
And I went back and it's funny when you record it and then you go back in the control room and listen and you're like, wow, that's really what I felt. And so I appreciate that.
I don't know if we've talked about this before, but I did a record at the Moose Lodge at Moose's place in 2018.
Yeah.
And we did a full length. It's called Ramble. And actually Allison Krause played on it. She's pretty good.
She's all right.
But same thing. We took the oldest acoustic guitar he had with the oldest strings, and the whole thing's tracked with that guitar, and it's great. You know? That's just one example of kind of what you're talking about. But
sometimes you hear the pick noise or the fret noise, or for me, like a breath. Sometimes I'll take a breath when I'm playing, and some people might cut that stuff out, but I'm like, just leave it in there. That's human elements.
Right. So I want to ask you about, the typical question, but I got to know, at what age and why fiddle?
Oh, well, I started when I was 3 years old. My parents, so I don't remember
talking or walking, but you remember. Yeah.
Like, I don't know. My parents saw some kids in the paper doing the Suzuki method, a classical method of training. And I don't know, they said they just had their little fiddles and they look cute. And Mom said they looked like they were in the mafia. I don't know why that was cute, but and they're holding their little cases. No, but they signed me up to the Suzuki music school. And my parents, like, Mom was retired by the time I was 10. Dad was already retired. And they just had a lot of time to devote to taking me to these lessons. We did the Suzuki method by the book. I had to practice an hour a day. Yeah. It was just kind of, I did fight him on practice. I just didn't never love to practice.
Well, yeah.
But my teachers told them from really early on, like, don't let her stop because she has a gift. Yeah. And honestly, when I watch some of these videos of me like playing my first recital at 4 and a half or something, playing like 20, 30 songs, and like I'm like, I don't know, I don't remember it really. Yeah. But like it wasn't that scratchy. Like I expected to be more scratchy, but I'm like, I don't know. Like I just did what the teachers told me to do.
That's crazy. That's young.
Yeah. It's just wild looking back. But I don't know. I just tried to practice as much as I was supposed to. And then at some age I realized that I really loved it. There wasn't ever a point that I was like, like some kids are like, I'm done with this. Like I never had that moment. Like I always loved to play.
Well, it's interesting to me because we're one of the few people, and by one of the few, I mean the only person I know that has the old perfect pitch. Oh. And so the reason I bring that up is not to put you on the spot, but to say it does make you wonder, like, what if your parents, they didn't care about you playing music, and all of a sudden you didn't ever get interested in it, you went some other path, and now this person that is so gifted with an ear for music and to hear pitch doesn't play. It's just strange. It's almost like I think you might have kind of been made to do it.
I feel like that.
Yeah, I think
God's
so.
Gifting. And,
that's kind of what I think too. And I hope that we live in a place where people who do have that gift somehow or another figure out a way to get into the thing that they, I'd like to think we do anyways. So Jenee Fleenor, but that's your married name.
That is.
All right. What's your maiden name?
My maiden name happens to be Keener.
And we're not making that up. So Keener to Fleenor. So that's pretty interesting.
Do you know my first name? This is a whole nother
Oh, no, I don't know this.
Bag of worms.
Okay, hang on just a minute. What is it?
My whole name?
Yeah.
It's Georgie, but Georgie is spelled Georg, capital E.
Okay. All right. I don't know, Angelo.
Georgie, Jenee, Keener, Fleenor. And this is funny because my mom, because I've been playing with George Strait, and Mom goes, "Are you going to tell George that y'all share the same name?" And I said, Mom, that's probably not going to be my lead off.
Yeah.
Hey, George.
Mr. Strait, just want you to know.
A lot of people call me George.
And you may have told this before, and I'm sorry to keep going back on it, but why the E? What's the deal with that?
Oh, Lord. Mom thought it was clever because someone down the street was named Deanie, and it was DEAN, capital E, and she thought it was, I guess that's Mom's creativity. I think that's where I get my creative brain because Mom is pretty creative.
I love it.
And so she's like, my dad's name is George.
Yeah.
So either they wanted a little boy or she's like, no, she said Georgie, but she wanted to put the capital E. And then my dad's middle name was Price. And she liked the name Renee, but she started going down the alphabet.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, maybe Perse.
Perse.
Oh my God, I'm so glad. Mom.
I don't know. That's
horrible
pretty good.
idea. Per se.
But
no.
it is interesting to me that someone who has such an interesting first name that is a story in itself then ends up marrying someone.
Oh, right.
Oh,
well, and this is just God, I will say. So I don't know. I used to practice my autograph as like whatever, in teenager and practice my handwriting. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to always keep Keener because it just goes, I've got my little autograph down.
And if your name was Jenee Smith Fleenor,
yeah,
okay, I could see you keeping that, right?
So I'd practice Jenee Keener. I thought, if I ever get married, whatever, I'm just gonna keep Keener. And then wouldn't it be funny, like God, to have me meet someone named Dwayne Fleenor? And we met on AOL randomly enough. We didn't intend to meet. We found out there was a church service that we were both going to be attending. Yeah. And I'm like, we might as well say hi. And then the rest is history, I guess.
Wow.
And I'm like, what? His screen name was Fleenor, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's a Fleenor?
Yeah.
And he said, that's my last name. And I was like, that rhymes with Keener. That's very...
That's great.
Crazy. Yeah.
Well, so again, we'll circle back around to George Strait, just so everybody knows that we have played with George Strait.
Yes.
But you have... since that day, you've been back out and played with him, right?
Yeah. It's been really wild. I mean, when we got to play with him, I said, bucket list, check.
Yeah, check, right.
This is when Jamie's band and y'all asked me to play. I remember Jimmy Melton saying, hey, would you like to play with George Strait? And I said, does a squirrel have climbing gear?
That's right. That was the big... Yeah, and I remember Jimmy Melton hung up the phone. He's like, she said yes in a very Jenee way. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know where I was sitting when I answered him. Like, that was such a moment.
Yeah.
But then in this past year, sadly, George's fiddle player passed away.
Yes.
And I got that call. So me and another fiddle player, Jason Roberts, amazing fiddle player, were splitting the gigs this year. And it's been one of the biggest joys, but one of the hardest gigs I've ever stepped into because the amazing Gene Elders, I looked up to him so much. And, I just wanted to do a great job for him, honestly, and George and everybody.
Well,
but,
sure.
But stepping on that stage that first time in Indianapolis was, gosh, it was amazing, but there was a lot of weight behind it.
There is. I get that. And you weren't exactly stepping onto the stage at the Indianapolis County Fair either.
No, it was 50,000 or something. That's crazy.
Yeah. So there's that part
yeah,
of
there's
it
that.
too.
I had a moment up there. I'm like,
yeah,
freaking out a little bit. But
you weren't. I mean, that's the larger crowds wasn't something that you're not used to because you played with Blake Shelton for a while, right?
Yeah, 10 years.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah, it had been a while since I'd been on a stadium gig.
Yeah.
But obviously I'd done that before, and there's the moving cameras and all that, which I'd done on The Voice. I'd played on The Voice for many years, and always those cameras when they're swooping down, like that's how you reach the person in the very back of the stadium, and so it's fun. Like I love all of that, and getting to be up there with Ace and the whole band. Like,
that's so
what
cool.
in the world? The twin guitars next to me, and the steel, and all the things. George, like smiling at. I said I've about winked my eyeball out of this.
Yeah,
I like he looks at me, during Cheyenne and Fireman, and I'm like, I got you.
Yeah.
It's just so fun.
Yeah,
so,
that's so the first time that I met him, I was with Jamie down in Boerne, Texas, and they were doing this golf tournament. So George has a golf tournament every year, and Jamie was like, well, George is going to be on stage tonight. Do you want to play? And I was like, does a squirrel have right? Right, exactly. So it ends up just being like me and Jamie and George Strait on a stage just playing acoustic stuff, and I'm playing harmonica and just grinning ear to ear. But he didn't play any George Strait songs. He played Billy Joe Shaver songs.
Really?
That's pretty much all he played. And so I didn't think I could like him anymore. But then he goes out and plays Billy Joe Shaver songs all night. I'm like, this guy's amazing. So he's really cool though.
I hope there's YouTube of all that.
I don't know. That may have preceded YouTube. I don't know.
That's awesome.
But it was a lot of fun. But anyways, so you did some shows with Jamie, and that's kind of how we got to meet and hang out. And and in that process, I think it was right when we were down in Key West 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
You were in the process of really putting this new band together, right?
We didn't have a band name yet.
Oh, really?
We were still the Josh Martin Super Group, which
that's pretty strong, but I think the other one might be a little,
Which really, that's how the whole band started. We were playing with Josh Martin in Michigan, and it's funny now when there's moments where I'm getting nervous or whatever because I'm stepping into the lead role too, and I'm like, can we just go back to Josh Martin Super Group?
Right.
He's like, nope, we're
on
all
him.
in.
Yeah, focus on him.
But we found we found the band name, which was the longest. Should have been the shortest process because Woodbox Heroes is the name of the band.
There you go.
And that was one of the first names we threw out there.
All right, so we are back, and here's the deal. Like I mentioned earlier, it's hot in here.
It's hot.
Miss Judy is sweating.
Yes.
And bless her heart. And so the cameras got too hot and they shut off. But man, I just love the world of podcasts, and because we're just winging it here.
Yeah.
So we've also
good.
got the air on. We're going to leave the air on, and we don't care if it makes too much noise or not because we're hot.
Yeah.
So we're going to carry on, and we're going to talk about this band that you got kicked off about 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And you were telling the story about where the name came from. And I'll let you carry on. Actually, we'll just pick up where we left off. So, you told me.
Well, and it's our first real gig as a band, but we didn't have a band name, but we knew we were a band we were opening for Jamie and George Strait.
Right.
So, but we were going under the name the Josh Martin Super Group because we didn't have a band name. And so eventually we came up with Woodbox Heroes, which just resonated with us.
That's great.
I mean, there were so many different, all the instruments. It's a bluegrass band, so we play these woodbox instruments. And, and then who doesn't want to be a hero, I guess,
I just think it's great. It looks good on a shirt, too.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, it throws it back to so many of our heroes.
Yeah.
And for me, I always say Barry Bales, our bass player, is the heroes of the Woodbox Heroes because he is all of our heroes in the band.
Yeah.
He's been with Alison Krauss since the beginning.
Oh, man, yeah.
And those record covers that I would look at, and I'm like, there's Barry Bales. And so it's just so awesome to get to share the stage with all of them and for me to look behind me and go, oh, my gosh, like another dream.
It is.
True.
It's funny you mentioned that because I can remember on a much lesser scale, but I'd be playing that at Roberts like in 99 or 2000, Roberts Western World.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd be up there singing, and then I'd step back and I'd watch these guys take solos, and I'm like, these are the greatest musicians in the world.
Yeah.
Gary Morris is playing steel, and Brooks and Dunn.
Absolutely.
And just anyways, I could keep going, but it's just, I remember that feeling of like, wow, just really in amazement. But,
fires you up.
But Woodbox Heroes, absolutely amazing. And I'll go ahead and ask this now. Are you guys doing any shows? Are you?
Yeah, right now we're getting ready to do our big run in Michigan, which is actually where the band started. We, a few years ago, Josh called us and there was a guy up there, Tom Petzold. We love you, Tom.
Yeah.
We say blame it on Tom.
Blame it on Tom.
That's the reason we're a band. And he had us come up there. And the first time we did this, I I was touring with Blake as well and doing all the things I do. But man, it was something so special. And they're like, how did those gigs in Michigan go? And I said, oh my God, I felt like a lightning bolt went through me. That's how much fun I had. And it was just electrifying. And the audience was, I'm like, the way I described it was they acted like they'd never heard music before.
Right.
So I was like, and it was sort of during COVID time. So I'm like, maybe it's been a while since they have heard music. But we went up there the next year and felt the same way.
Yeah.
So eventually I looked at Josh and I was like, man, are you feeling what I'm feeling? Like that we could go in the studio and actually do a record.
Right.
And he was like, I'm kind of thinking it too, but you're almost scared to say it. And I don't think Josh realized that I had this artist self about me that's always been in my brain. And I had always had this thought of me being able to be a part of a band of studio quality musicians. But, you know, I'm so busy doing so many things I didn't have time to put that together, but this was it. I just heard God saying, this is it. This is that dream you've had. And so I took the chance and I asked Josh, I'm like, maybe we should ask everybody and see if they'd be into recording. And everybody was. And then I started looking for songs, and Josh is an amazing writer. And then Barry had a song he wrote with Chris Stapleton that was like, oh my gosh, such an awesome moment called Cannonball. We just had our first number one with a song called Cross the Line.
Oh, unbelievable, yeah.
And so it's all just been us doing it independent. And like the word that keeps coming to mind is freedom. Like it has been the most freeing thing musically. Like nobody tells us what to wear. Nobody tells us what to play.
Great.
It's just all us, just being us. And it's been such a joy, like one of the biggest joys musically. And to think if I would have not taken the chance on it, and I've had to say no to some things to make this happen, but it's been so worth it.
That's
so
great.
Worth it.
It's funny, as you're talking, there's so many things that, and we've spent a little time out running around, and you've touched on a few different things, and you're talking about nobody tells you what to wear, and I'm like, well, nobody tells you what to wear.
Well, I don't know.
And we were in Vegas doing some shows, and they had like some kind of Christmas swap meet thing going on.
Oh my
and
Lord!
You and I and Jimmy Melton went down to this giant, and
during NFR, right?
Yeah, it was
the
NFR.
big Christmas, Cowboy Christmas.
Cowboy Christmas. And you walk in, and it's almost like everybody in the place is like, oh, Jenee, come here. I got some new turquoise I want to show you. And it was fun being in there watching all that go down.
Oh.
But there's so many things I'm thinking about, I want to touch on, but it's like, but we'll be here for 3 hours. I don't want to do that. But that just means we'll have to do it again sometime.
Please.
Because, 4 times CMA,
Actually 5 times, which is insane.
Just recently.
Yeah, the last.
Oh, that's right.
I don't even know.
So there you go.
Who's counting?
Yeah, I mean, who's counting? But I didn't think about something, and I think I might have seen this somewhere. But first female, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy.
It is crazy. There's so many that came before me that, should have been up.
Oh, I get it.
But hopefully I can carry this torch for women. And there's so many that reach out to me, especially young girls that are moving to town that I guess look up to me, and I try to be so open and have coffee with them and just tell them, I never thought of that as a bump in the road or whatever, like being a female. This is going to be a harder.
The microphone doesn't care.
Right. And I always say the proof's in the picking. So,
yeah, that's right. Amen.
Yeah. So I just knew I had a goal, and I wanted to be a session player, and that was just it. And what we do, there's just not a ton of women, and it's not like the guys aren't going like, we don't want women in here.
Oh, no,
I've
it's
never
not
had that feeling at all.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, maybe I hope I'm bringing a light to, like, this is a job you can do if play on records and make a living doing it. So yeah, I hope
that's awesome. Well, congrats on the new one.
Thanks.
5-time CMA Musician of the Year. Mm-hmm. That's pretty unbelievable. And that little, by the way, the little 3 or 4 year old girl is applauding. Like, you know what I mean? I think about that sometimes. I remember one time we did this is on a much different scale, but we were out with Jamie and we did a show with, the new version of Skynyrd. Charlie Daniels was there and Marshall Tucker Band. And I remember thinking, man, my 18-year-old self is losing his mind right now for that day,
Absolutely.
So cool. So, yeah, I often think about the young us that's like.
I'm still sometimes that girl, my teenage self going, how do I think it really hits me sometimes when I'm talking to someone and maybe giving advice and they're like listening to me. And I'm like, you're listening to what I'm saying,
I know,
like hanging on every word. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is, and I think part of me like has realized what a responsibility this is, like, and to take care with everything that I'm doing and that there are eyes on you. And, I think it's important to set a good example. And, I don't think I'm all that.
Well, I get it. And you do an amazing job of it because there's a balance involved in it, right? And I've always thought about that when it comes to musicians, singers, songwriters, or whatever. You have to be confident, but there's a line,
Yeah.
And I feel like you play a very good, you balance it very well.
Well.
So I remember us talking about, and I'm going to mess it up, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but there was something you told me one time about fours.
Oh, man. Yes.
And so can we dive into it?
We can.
Okay.
And it goes along with the band. I'll try to it's a long story.
Well,
how we
don't
got
worry
our
about
band.
it.
No, how we got our band name, but I can totally shorten it. It's kind of a fun story.
Yeah.
The 444 is the name of our new Woodbox Heroes record.
Right.
So.
Yeah, but there's a story behind it.
Oh,
right?
yeah. So the fours, I started seeing fours in my life pop up. I was actually in a bus wreck, which is, we've traveled on buses so many times and something you hear about, but when you're in a bus wreck, it is
I can't even.
awful.
I can't even. I've dreamed about it, but I've never, thank God, been in it. So.
And I know there were angels that saved us that night.
Yeah.
But that was the first night. It happened at 4:44 in the morning.
Man.
And there were so many fours, even in the picture of where the bus wreck happened. There was some fours up on a billboard and exit 44, like so many fours.
Right.
And I looked up what fours meant. I'm like, why so many fours? And it said something about angels being there. I mean, I knew that had to be the case anyway.
Right.
But, and then, I don't know, I remember talking to Josh about this band and we were coming up with band names. And I said, these fours keep popping up in my life. And I don't know why. Like, it's a good thing, I think. And I try not to be too spacey about it, So I told Josh about how much I love Buc-ee's.
We can't.
This is so random.
I know. Angelo's like, yes, let's go.
You love Buc-ee's too.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
So, but if you go, don't go on a weekend. If it's your first time,
go
when you can.
Go
enjoy
at 3
it.
a.m. on a Tuesday.
Yes.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Right.
And they're still making the brisket sandwiches.
Right.
And people think they pay me to talk about them.
No.
And they do not. They have a lot of my money. So.
Yeah.
So I pull up to this Buc-ee's. I was headed to Atlanta to play some worship gigs, actually. And we're talking about band names. And I took a picture of me gassing my car up and sent it to Josh because he knew what a Buc-ee's fan I was. And I didn't even know till after I sent it, the gas nozzle, like the picture, the second it took the picture, it was on 444, $4.44, which is so random.
Yeah.
And then up above, like sitting on the gas pump, were these two little figurines, and it was Groot and Thor from, I don't know,
Guardians of the Galaxy, maybe, or something like that.
I haven't even seen it, but there were these two little guys sitting there. I was like, Josh, I'm like, there's a 444 in this picture. And he goes, and those are Woodbox Heroes sitting up there. And I was like, oh, wow. I said, I like the sound of that.
That sounds good.
And so I'm like, where did these guys? So I took the little figurines. Yeah. I'm like, some kid left them.
Some kid somewhere right now. They got on the interstate and they circled back around because he was screaming and they were gone.
I hope not. They couldn't have circled back because I spent probably 3 hours in that Buc-ee's.
Oh, there you go. Good point.
They had plenty of time.
They had plenty of time. All right.
So I took the two little figurines, and for the longest time, they sat in my dash looking at me. And Josh and I sing the lead vocals in Woodbox Heroes, so I just took it as like he's Thor because actually his hair kind of looks like Thor, and I'm Groot, the Woodbox guy.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, they look like Woodbox Heroes. And then fast forward, and we went through 10,000 names.
Yeah.
And ended up coming back to Woodbox Heroes. So
great.
Wild. But the fours. Oh, another time the 444 came up, we were writing an instrumental for the record, and I had my phone recording on voice memo, and we're writing this. The fiddle tune actually I played in the front of the show, 444, and guess what number the voice memo was?
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Yeah, and
that's a lot of voice memos.
That's a lot
to
of
land on that one.
Yeah, and so the second we're recording the work tape, I said, Josh, look, and if you buy the record, you will hear this. I took that voice memo and put that front part where I go, oh, look at that, Josh. Yeah. And he goes, oh, 444. And so we named the song 444.
And I've got to say this too, because when you first told me the fours was before that.
Was it?
I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
If it wasn't, it was very close to it. But I guess my point is it's continued to happen since you've said something about it. So
continued to happen. Right. To the point if I'm on the phone with, I'm like, oh, I see him on license plates, like,
yeah.
And I'm on the phone with Josh or Matt or Barry, and I'm like, 444. And they're like, oh, God, they've heard it so much.
Yeah.
So, people say God winks or whatever, and I just kind of take it as that.
Well, I talked to my buddy Drake White, which we've talked about that, and he mentioned something too. We was talking about hawks, and he was like, they named their son Hawk, and there was a lot of spiritual reasoning behind it. But then I told him that on the way to to see him, I saw a hawk.
No way.
And, but not just saw it, but I saw it and I thought, wonder if that means something. And then we talked about it 20 minutes later without me bringing it up. So it was interesting. So, but he made a good point. He said that a lot of times, the spirit is in the looking and seeing, and not that necessarily there's 4 or 3 fours on a license plate in front of you, but it's the fact that you're in the mindset of seeing it and spiritually being contacted with whatever that thing, or connected with whatever that is.
Even when you called me for this podcast, I told you I was sitting in my lawn because that's why the song that I do and everything resonated with me so much, because I'm obsessed with just walking around my lawn in my bare feet.
That's great.
And I actually heard the Lord when I was dealing with some panic attacks and anxiety and depression, and it was starting to get warmer, and I just heard God say, just go outside and walk around barefoot. And I was like, and then I heard that song. But when you called me, I was sitting in my yard, and I thought maybe you saw me sitting out there, and you didn't.
She's like, did you just see me sitting out here with my bare feet? And I was like, no.
About to hug a tree.
Right. No.
And I'm like, oh, but you told me about this amazing podcast, and it was about your faith as well. And it was so wild because you were telling me about the armor of God. And I had I don't know, for some reason, I ran over that passage again in the Bible and was meditating on all the different armor. And it's like God to do that. This happens in my life so much. And I think it's because I am actually listening to him now.
That's it. Yeah, I think so too.
I've been a Christian for so long, but I'm finally realizing it's not about just being a Christian. It's about me living for him and listening to him and being obedient to him.
Yeah.
And through all these things, like
well, when we were talking on the phone, you mentioned a book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's something you want to talk about or not, but
absolutely.
But it seemed like it was something important to you. So or it is. So I thought I'd bring that up.
It is. And it's so a year and a half ago or so, I was having a lot of people come up to me and some of my bandmates going, do you ever say no to anything? And I'm like, no.
Well, and you may be going to touch on this, but I'll step in and say that as a musician, you come to town saying yes.
Oh, yeah.
You have to.
Yeah.
You can't, you're going to, I'll do this. Yeah, I'll do that. And there, as you're going to point out, I'm sure has to come a point where you realize I can't say yes anymore.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's
totally it.
Right.
I mean, and that's the the mission or whatever. Like everyone knows this. Like when you move to Nashville, like when you get called for a session, yeah. I mean, is it at 3 a.m.? Okay, let's go.
I'll be there.
Like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's precisely it. So I've realized when they asked me that, I hadn't thought about it, but I think they could see where I was drowning. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, I don't think I do say no ever. Yeah. And just one day I had started to like change, like my prayer life was changing at that time. Mm-hmm. And I was just trying to take time in the mornings to just recenter myself. So I think that was part of me listening. And when they said that to me, I just remember one morning in my prayer time, and sometimes my prayer time was sitting there for 3 minutes. That's all I could do was just sit there for 3 minutes. And anyway, but I Googled like books on saying no, and this book popped up, and it's called No is a Beautiful Word, and written by Kevin Harney. And I ordered it from Amazon. It came in the mail, and I'm talking the first 3 pages knocked me down. Yeah. And it talks about how you have this plate at a buffet, and you're putting all these things on your plate, and you're like, oh, that looks good. Oh, that looks great. Oh, and you go down the line, you're like, gosh, I still want that, and I want that one. And eventually things just start falling off because you have no more room. Right. And I could just see myself, like people ask me, when I win a CMA, they're like, what do you get when you win? And I said, more work. More work. And so, and another way I describe it is like, it's trying to catch raindrops. And, there just comes a point you can't do it all. No. And I'm just trying to figure this out myself. Like I don't have a manager. Like it's just me doing everything. And some people are probably going, oh gosh, poor you. I'm like getting to live all my dreams. But I hit a very, very hard wall called burnout. And it was actually after I read the book, but I'm so glad I read that book at that time. I had been journaling and I hit this hard wall. My body just physically, like I hit depression and anxiety and panic attacks. I'd never dealt with panic attacks. And it was usually leading up to me playing with my band, which I'm like, God, I know you have brought me one of the biggest joys playing with this band, but I am freaking out before, and I had never dealt with that, but I think it was so important to me. And it was a different weight that I hadn't felt before. Yeah. And I'm getting a little older now. And as a woman, like your body's changing and all these things. But I hit this wall and it was scary. I will say I have had some crazy panic attacks that I used to hear people talk about anxiety and panic attacks. And I'm like, you just like...
I know what you mean.
Yeah. And I didn't understand it. Well, I understand it now and realize that if I don't back away from some things and take some time for me and at that time, God, oh my gosh, there were some days that I'm like, all I could say was, God, help. I don't know how I'm going to get through this day. Right. And, because it seemed like one ask was like a mountain, just the way I was mentally. And oh my goodness, he helped me so much. There's so many friends I can name, and I'm so grateful to have so many amazing Christian friends that prayed for me and helped me through that time. Yeah. So I've just had to be really mindful about where I'm placing your time, and I realize that we don't get any more time back. Mm-hmm. And how important it is that we're doing what God is telling us to do. Yeah. And obeying him. And so there's so many things that have happened where I've actually obeyed him and actually bearing fruit. Mm-hmm. and I'm like, golly, there's been so many years here that I have just been a complacent Christian. Right. And just been floating along, strong arm in God, like, I got this covered. Where I realized that I wasn't able to look somebody in the eye and go, how are you doing? Like, how can I help you? Yeah. And so this is past few years of like my life's been changing in the best way. And I'm glad I've gone through all that because it's just made me a a stronger Christian.
You said, I've had so many thoughts while you were saying that, and the Spirit-filled thoughts. Two things that I really think about when you're saying that stuff is, number one, you have, I think if you look at it from a musician standpoint, earthly, human-wise, there's a pinnacle, and you've gotten to it.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of people who struggle to try to get to, not just in music, but in all facets of life, try to get to this pinnacle, and they don't make it. And there's some people who don't even try. My point is, anxiety and depression can hit anybody at any level of life, whether you're seemingly super successful or you're just struggling to get through the day, that nobody should ever be surprised when it happens to them.
Yeah.
And that we'll get on this a little bit later, the fact that, God's fruits are not those things, and that those things come from something, so come from the enemy. They come from us.
Yeah.
And a lot of that stuff, and the other thing I was going to mention as you were speaking that I thought about was that when you come to Nashville as a musician, songwriter, artist, whatever it is you might be, it's so self-driven and self-fulfilling.
Yeah.
Now, you might get in a band with 2 or 3 other folks as a kid or young that you're hoping the best for everybody. But really, at the end of the day, you're pushing for that one person. So it's self-driven, and if you don't, nobody else is going to do it for you. So you're surrounded by all these people on Music Row and in Nashville that are looking out for number one. They don't care about you.
Yeah.
And Nashville doesn't owe you anything. So you spend 20 years or more, me, and you get so focused on that. And I'm not saying you, I'm saying me, because I was there. I did it. And so then you get to a point where you're like, man, there's just no self-fulfillment in this.
Exactly, yeah.
And so thankfully we get to a point where we go, okay, well, God. And then as soon as you say that, he goes, okay, but you got some stuff you're going to have to work through. And you're going to have to do some of this stuff on your own. And so then that's when the depression and the guilt and that kind of anxiety and stuff seem to set in. But man, at the end of the day, isn't there just one answer?
Absolutely. Jesus.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it. And trust me, I'm sure you may have been here too, but I've tried other answers.
Oh, yeah.
And they're quick fixes.
Yeah.
And they work for a night or a week or whatever. But there's a day of reckoning coming. Yeah. And that sort of flows into, Fully Armed is the name of this show, and it's based off Ephesians chapter 6, put on the full armor of God. So before I ask you to come on, I ask, what is your go-to verse? And what verse arms you is what I try to say. And you sent me a verse, and I would love for you to to read that or to tell me what it is.
Well, when you asked me that, I yesterday I spent time in my prayer time, and I'm like, because there's been a lot of verses that have, that have helped me, obviously. Yeah. But this was the verse that when I started my prayer life, my prayer life has changed. It changed from 3 minutes and to there was a time I would spend an hour just praising God and praying and this amazing journey. And then I've had some visions and I found it in my journal where I had the day that I had written this down, and I didn't think I've kept a lot of journals.
Oh yeah, no, I get it.
So I'm like, I doubt I can find it. And there it was.
Yeah.
And Psalms 46:10, be still and know that I'm God.
Yes.
And actually I screenshotted, I'll just share you a page out of my journal. This was on February 16th, I guess 2023.
Okay.
I wrote, be still and know that I am God, but in the version of my Bible, it said, cease striving. And that just hit me different. Yeah. Because I had just been gung-ho, just strive. And it wasn't for awards. It was just, I love doing what I do, and you're trying to catch these raindrops. And so in my 3 minute, this is when I was spending 3 minutes in my prayer time, I said, I saw a long, gray, cold tunnel, and I was running so hard and so fast, and I was so tired. At the end of this cold tunnel was a big, bright yellow light, but I just could never seem to reach it until I stopped. And then the light came to me.
Wow. That's strong.
And that was me. I just
Wow.
was running. And nothing could satisfy that in me. Only the Lord.
Yeah.
And those were the moments like where he's like, I'm going to replenish your soul. I'm going to, if you just listen to me and what I'm telling you.
Right.
And then there were some hard moments. Like I gave my testimony in this church at Josh's church up in Kentucky. And I mean, I haven't done this ever.
I get it.
And I knew God was asking me to speak even before Josh asked me. I was like, God, really?
Yeah.
Like, be careful what you ask for.
Yeah. No kidding.
When you say God used me. And so, and during that time I was going through those panic attacks and anxiety.
Right.
I'm like, God, why can't, like, I need to get my stuff together before I step on this platform.
Yeah. Yes.
But God's like, no,
Just
I
go.
want you to talk about this.
Yeah.
And so it all turned out great and fine. And, but I was struggling at that point, but I just was open with them and was like, this is what I'm dealing with. And I know there's people in here dealing with this too. And I actually sang in everything. Actually, the reason I found this song, by a group called Paper Horses, kind of a folk kind of worship record, was because I was doing a gig downtown in Nashville, and I started to have it was in front of a bunch of Hollywood people.
Yeah.
And I started having these panic attacks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, God, why? Like, this is supposed to be fun. And I was having fun, but it was really late. And I just knew when my body got tired, it started to freak out. And beautiful Byron House had been playing, bass player, had been playing with this group and had told me about their music. And but anyway, Byron was on this gig and he took my hand. We were playing like a private event, and there was a bar there. And he took my hand at that bar and prayed for me at that moment. And it helped me so much.
How about that?
Get through. I mean, it was a fun evening, but for whatever reason, my body was freaking out at that moment.
Yeah.
And what that meant so much to me. So anyway, that was him listening to the Lord. And so anyway, I've just been really trying to listen to him. And since then, I felt the Lord. The first thing, when I started the notebook, I wrote down some dreams that I had. And the first thing I wrote down was start a musician fellowship. Mm-hmm. And since then, I've started a group. We're actually going through the notebook.
Oh, wow.
Because I could just tell there's a lot of musicians in my circle that are dealing with the same thing that I'm dealing with.
Right.
And just in this industry. Another thing was to I wanted to do a fiddle record. I felt the Lord saying, like, you should do a fiddle record. That's what you do, you know. And so I had to say no to some things so I could actually do my fiddle record, which I'm working on. And what a joy. Oh my gosh, I've been wanting to do that for so long. Yeah. And so, and a whole list of other things that I'm getting to. I'm getting to the bucket list, not the necessarily the George Strait big, those things that are bucket list things, but those just loving on people.
Yeah.
One of the things was cooking a meal. I hadn't even been able to have time to cook, which is crazy.
That's unbelievable. I believe
But you're running through the drive-thrus all the time.
Yeah.
And so I'm enjoying cooking.
Right.
So some of those things that I haven't enjoyed in a long time. So
yeah.
The moment you called me was one of those moments I'm like just feeling so calm and so peaceful, and it was just sitting in my yard.
Being still.
Being still.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so when you sent that to me, you know, and what I love about that is it's, you know, in Psalms, and there's a lot of Psalms, and this one in particular is pretty short, but it was such a quick, short, like, it wasn't like 3 verses or what it was. And that's what I took from it. Be still and know that I am God.
Yeah. And
I took a lot from that. And actually, I kind of studied on it a little bit, and then I realized, like, kind of what it was written about, that whole psalm. Mm-hmm. But then I realized, no, I'm not going to get too tangled up in the history and the law.
I know.
I
actually went down that rabbit hole today.
We don't need to do that. Let's just look at that one line.
There's so much to be.
And I don't remember who I was talking to recently, but we were discussing some of this stuff, and it was about what is God to you in a quick statement, you know? And I thought, Dad. you know?
Oh, yeah.
Like father and I'm baby. I'm not, adolescent, teenager, whatever. I'm a little child.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, we get back into scripture where he says, come to me as the child. And so when I see, be still and know that I'm God, I can see Dad, God, Father in heaven going, calm down.
Oh, yeah.
I'll take care of this. If you'll just stop. And I can almost, I don't know, I'm visual. I can almost see him with his hand on this kid's head, and the kid's just trying to grab and do all that. And he's like, be still. I got it. I'll take care of this. And so I love that.
So many times in my prayer time during that, it's like I would just want to say all these things.
Yeah.
And this verse would come to me, and it's almost like he's going,
Yeah.
hush.
Because we're just trying to figure this stuff out ourselves. And
isn't it crazy, like looking back then, how he's orchestrated it?
yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of like what you're saying, doing the Fiddle record and that kind of stuff. I've had an idea for years of doing not a gospel record like me doing a gospel record, but having friends come in and do some of their favorite gospel songs. And so I've really chased the rabbit down the hole, and it just ends up not coming together. It didn't work out. And then I'm like, but I was pushing so hard. And so this thing, like, I didn't even know what, and I still don't know what I'm doing. I didn't have any like big long-term plans to do this or whatever. He just said, okay, now if you'll just be still, I'll show you what I want you to do.
Yeah.
So here we are today. But
That's awesome.
so I wanted to talk a little bit more about that, but be still is pretty much self-explanatory. And I thought it was interesting too that, the musician picks the Psalms to have their favorite,
right?
The songs.
Right. Yeah. And that's actually part of the rabbit hole I went down today, was like, gosh, these Psalms were, this was about music, right? They would sing these.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, and I don't know, I was like, well, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But the one verse, being still, means no music,
Yeah.
like just being in silence, which has actually been kind of my, it's just been so beautiful. Like, there's been a lot more quiet in my life, and I've just enjoyed it. Like, it's just filled me up, replenished my soul. So
it's so great that we're talking about this stuff, because in my notes I wrote down, to speak to you, and I wrote this: our life in trying to hustle and climb the mountain, and even when you get to the top, you're still not satisfied. You just want to keep climbing, even though there's no mountain left to climb.
Yeah.
And that's human nature,
Yeah.
right? That's the flesh,
absolutely.
and the spirit versus the flesh.
Yeah.
And but man, yeah, just thinking about I guess in life in general, and no matter what you're doing in life, but of course in music, we always kind of self-reflect back to music, but that climb it's intense. And it's such a seemingly spiritual thing because it's music, right? So,
Oh yeah. Maybe I said this earlier. I never, as that kid, I wasn't going, you know what, I'm going to win 5 CMAs one day. Like, that was never,
right.
Like, I never said that. All I said was, I just want to be a studio musician, and I'm getting to live my dream. And then, it's just icing on the cake, the awards, like, what? But there is something in you that's like, oh, well, then you got to keep up. You got to keep up with the demands.
Yes.
And eventually you're just emptying yourself.
Yeah.
And, I'm like, what, at what point, like, what are you're, yeah. And that's where I realized, oh my gosh, I have to say no to something.
Yeah. That's I had a songwriter buddy of mine that has written a lot of like big hit songs.
Yeah.
And he was probably 3 or 4 hit songs deep, and I walked into a writing session with him, and I'm like, how's it going, man? Of course, I would love to have at this point, have a hit.
Yeah,
that would be great.
Right.
Oh man, I haven't had a cut in like 6 months. And I'm thinking, I don't remember where the conversation went, but the point being, you get to the top of the mountain and the flesh wants to just keep climbing. Yeah. And so I guess sort of to sum up, but then at the top or the bottom, wherever you are, he sits down and puts his hand and says, just be still and know that I got this.
Yeah.
And I do feel like, I try to base this show around Scripture, and I do feel like having something super short and sweet like that to constantly go back and remind yourself of, because, man, we get so tangled up in the moment sometimes. And you were talking earlier about you're about to go do a really cool thing and play in front of some really cool people one night, but you're still overwhelmed with this thing. Yeah. And that's the battle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and the spirits.
There's been times I've been on stage and like I have had to pray myself off that ledge. I feel like I could just crumble. Yeah. Because of the panic or anxiety or whatever. And it was honestly when I started talking to people about it that it helped me so much. I realized I'm not alone in this, that there's so many other people that have dealt with this. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one.
No, you're not. Let me tell you, I can tell you a story about a guitar player on stage in front of a huge crowd with the 5-time CMA winning Musician of the Year standing right beside him. And now I got to play a solo. Oh. What in the world? Anxiety. No. But it's funny, though, because I remember, us playing together and watching you step out, like you're going to step out and play. And then in Jamie's band, as you know, you go in a circle and everybody plays a solo. So now it's my turn. And I'm like, well, I can either sit back and go, oh, gosh, or I can just step right up in front of it and turn it up as loud as it'll go and see what happens next, I love it. So,
that's what you
live
did.
Music, that's what you get.
Oh, yeah.
So, speaking of live music, we're going to play a song, and you already mentioned it to a certain extent, but this song obviously means a lot to you.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so I'll let you kind of intro. You already said a little bit about it, but yeah.
Well, it's a song called In Everything, and like I said, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety at that moment, and I just went to listen to that Paper Horses record, and this song just like I had been barefoot walking in the grass, and it talks about that, and it also talks about frequencies. Let's see the second verse. A still small voice, your frequency. And it was really fascinating to me because I had been seeing a doctor, and she was like, you have good frequencies. I was like, what does that even mean? Like, but it meant a lot. Like and I think we feel that in music, like and I know this, like music is healing. And I think in the past few years, I've had more people tell me, they have said to me, I don't know what it is, but when you play, it stirs something in my soul. And I know what it is. It's the Lord.
Absolutely.
And I'm thinking I'm more in tune with that now than ever. So I don't know. There were so many things in this, in this song that resonated with me.
Well, and I know I said intro it, now I'm going to start talking again, but we should we'll get back together and talk about the idea of music and frequencies being of the Lord, yet they also can be used in so many other ways too. And there's a lot of conversation to be had about, how God uses music and then how we want to use music. So anyways, long conversation about that. I'm sure we won't go into right now. But for now, I wanted to, and we'll say our goodbyes, and then we'll play the song In Everything. Great song. And actually, I was sitting on the porch last night running over it. Yeah. And there's a line about birds, right?
Oh, and the wind, the storm, the morning dove all say it's true. When I hear their song, I am hearing you.
Yes. And that, I just was listening to it last night, and I'm like, that's a strong. That's a strong
And the
line.
writers on this, Taylor Leonard, Leslie Jordan, Jess Ray, and Sandra McCracken. Yeah. I have not met them, but I can't wait to meet them.
Well, hopefully, if you guys are watching and listening, that we'll be able to meet them, and maybe we'll go hang out with them sometime. But Jenee, thank you so much. I know when I say goodbye, I'm going to be like, why didn't I say this and that?
Lord.
But we'll just do it again, right?
Let's do it. And I just live across the hill there.
But thank you so much. And it's been a blessing to sit and talk to you about all this stuff, specifically, the music and obviously the scripture. Thank you for bringing the scripture that you did. That was fun, man. That girl is an inspiration. And she's just a sweetheart. Jenee Fleenor, thank you so much for coming on the show. Such a blessing to have you on. So the main thing I want to talk about in this, beside the scripture that we talked about, was the fact, and we pointed this out, that, man, depression, anxiety, stress, these things happen to everybody in all walks of life, no matter what your job is, no matter what your social status, and no matter how much money you do or don't have, it can hit everybody. So don't ever be surprised or feel alone when you're going through difficult stuff like that. Obviously, I hope from this episode that you get some inspiration from Scripture, but I also hope that you realize that you're not alone if you're dealing with these kind of things. Everybody goes through it. And there are people that can help, and there is Scripture that can help. And that's why I'll go to Psalm 46, verse 10, which is what Jenee brought to the table, which is, he says, "Be still and know that I am God." We talked about it in great depth, but it says, it goes on to say, "I will be exalted among the nations, and I will be exalted in the earth." That is just a big baller right there. That's a guy that's just saying, yeah, everybody's going to worship me. So just be still, sit down, stop trying to do everything on your own, and know that I am God. In other words, know that I'm in charge. So what I gather from that while we're talking about it is, yeah, he's in charge. And I have no question about that. However, we still got to get up in the morning. We got to stand up. We got to walk through the day. We got to have conversations. We've got to do all of the things that we do every day on our own power. And I think what he's saying is, yeah, I know you have to do that. But as it says in the New Testament, and Paul says, pray without ceasing, it's saying, yeah, but while you go through all of those things, just calm down, relax, don't be anxious. Paul says that too. Don't be anxious in anything. Through all things, through prayer and supplications, make your requests known unto God, and he will direct your paths. Be still and know that he is God. I'll just leave it at that. Thanks, Jenee, for coming on the show. It was a blessing, and I just know we're going to do it again very soon. And we'll see you guys again very soon on Fully Armed. Put your armor on.